September 1944. Behind the wire fences of Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, 42 German women, former officers, medics, and communications specialists of the Wehrmacht, watched with mocking smirks as American soldiers stumbled through what looked, to them, like a clumsy performance. No rigid lines, no parade ground precision. "They look like farmers playing at war," one prisoner sneered. For years, they'd been told their army was the finest the world had ever seen, that Germany's soldiers were sharper, braver, and infinitely more disciplined than the so-called amateurs of the Allies. To them, the American army was little more than a blunt hammer, powerful only because of its factories, not its fighters. But over the weeks that followed, these women would witness something they never expected. The very methods they laughed at would force them to confront a dangerous question. What if everything they'd been taught about military superiority was wrong? This is the story of how prisoners of war discovered a truth that shook the foundations of their beliefs. Before we dive in, take a second to support the channel. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss these hidden chapters of history. And if you enjoy this story, share it with a friend who loves military history. It helps us keep uncovering stories the textbooks leave behind. The Kansas wind carried dust across the wide training fields of Fort Leavenworth, a place where routine military drills blended with the uneasy presence of captured enemies. Beyond the fences stood a separate compound, home to Germany's women prisoners. Among them was Erika Weber, a decorated signals officer who still wore her pride like armor. To her, America's war machine was nothing more than brute industry. Tanks, trucks, planes, quantity over quality, power without finesse. Through the compound's narrow windows, Erika often watched American infantry train. What she saw confirmed everything German propaganda had promised her. Loose formations, casual stances, men who seemed more like farmhands than soldiers. "Look at them," she whispered with disdain, calling over her comrade Monica Braun, another veteran of German intelligence. "They shuffle, they wander. This is supposed to be discipline? In the Wehrmacht, such sloppiness would have earned punishment before breakfast." Monica narrowed her eyes, nodding. Years of indoctrination made the conclusion feel obvious. German troops moved like machinery, perfect gears, synchronized in precision. These Americans looked like a field of scattered parts, clumsy and ineffective, almost laughable. The compound held 42 women, each representing different branches of Germany's war effort: medics, clerks, radio specialists. Captured in France, most carried scars of loss and defeat, but clung to the myth of German superiority. The American success, they all agreed, was accidental. Factories replaced talent, numbers substituted for skill. The prisoners consoled themselves with this story nightly, because to believe otherwise meant admitting their empire had fallen to better soldiers. On the training field, U.S. drill instructors barked commands, but to German eyes, it lacked bite. The men laughed between movements, adjusted helmets, even shared jokes. Such behavior would have been unimaginable in German camps. Yet beneath the women's scorn lingered something else: curiosity. Why did these undisciplined Americans still win battles? Why did supposedly inferior troops drive German armies backward across Europe? The contradiction gnawed at them, though none admitted it aloud. Guards at Fort Leavenworth treated the women with a surprising formality. "Miss Weber," they would say, as though rank and respect still clung to them. It puzzled the Germans, accustomed to harsher prisoner treatment. Colonel Morrison, who oversaw the compound, observed the women carefully. He recognized their arrogance wasn't malice, it was indoctrination. Breaking it wouldn't come through punishment, but through exposure to a truth they couldn't deny once seen. Erika, though sharp-tongued, was also sharp-minded. She kept private notes on camp life, disguised as personal musings, but laced with intelligence habits. Every training exercise she mocked was secretly catalogued, waiting for some imagined future report. Each evening, the prisoners discussed the Americans over thin coffee. Their laughter filled the barracks when describing soldiers fumbling through obstacles. To them, it was living proof the Reich's fighters were the world's true professionals. Still, the war's tide told a different story. Normandy had broken German lines. France was lost. Even as the women jeered at American drills, news arrived of Allied advances that defied their beliefs in superiority. Some tried to reconcile the contradiction. Perhaps German soldiers were simply outnumbered. Perhaps betrayal, weather, or luck explained defeat. But never, not yet, would they admit that training philosophies themselves might hold the answer. On one September morning, Erika stood at the fence as U.S. troops ran through woodland maneuvers. She scoffed at the lack of synchronized steps, unaware she was witnessing a style of warfare her nation had underestimated. The Americans were not rehearsing a parade. They were preparing for combat where terrain shifted, commands faltered, and men had to think for themselves. To Erika, it looked like chaos. To the Americans, it was survival. That first week at Leavenworth was filled with certainty for the prisoners. Their men, they insisted, were superior in every way, but events were aligning to challenge that certainty and to rewrite the lessons they thought unshakable. From behind the tall wire fences, the German women gathered like spectators at a play. The field before them was their stage, where American soldiers performed what looked, in their eyes, like a comedy of incompetence. Erika Weber leaned forward, chin resting on the fence, watching with a mixture of superiority and disbelief. She saw soldiers advance in scattered lines, some crouching, others standing, each acting as though part of a different performance. "They're hopeless," she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. The words carried easily, igniting laughter among the group. Even Monica Braun chuckled, adding her own jab. "Farmers pretending to be warriors, pathetic!" Their voices rose in a chorus of mockery, echoing through the compound. To the prisoners, this spectacle confirmed their indoctrination. They imagined German generals watching with grim smiles, convinced their men would slice through such amateurs in real combat. Yet the guards nearby didn't bristle at the insults. Instead, they exchanged knowing glances, as though accustomed to the ridicule. They said nothing, perhaps confident that the training itself would answer louder than words. The women's derision became routine. Every morning they lined the fence like critics awaiting a disastrous performance. When Americans stumbled in mud or fumbled gear, laughter erupted, carrying across the dusty air with scornful delight. For the prisoners, this ritual wasn't just entertainment, it was reassurance. Each misstep they witnessed fortified the belief that their capture had been an accident of numbers, not proof of any flaw in German military philosophy. But privately, a question sometimes crept in. If the Americans were truly so hopeless, how had they stormed Normandy? How had they crushed German defenses fortified for years? None dared voice it, for pride was fragile. One afternoon, during a grueling obstacle drill, a soldier tripped headfirst into a ditch. The women howled with laughter, banging the fence with their fists. Erika sneered. "This is the mighty army that defeated us?" Even in their amusement, subtle unease grew. The same soldiers who looked clumsy in one drill regrouped quickly, showing bursts of efficiency that were harder to dismiss. Still, the women clung to their practiced ridicule. Colonel Morrison, watching from the administration building, observed the prisoners' reactions with interest. He knew their mockery was a shield, protecting them from confronting the deeper truth. That discipline wasn't the same thing as effectiveness. The prisoners clung to parade ground ideals. Perfect posture, synchronized steps, gleaming boots, these were the symbols of excellence they revered. Anything less looked like chaos, even if that chaos carried purpose beyond appearances. Night after night, their barracks buzzed with exaggerated stories of American clumsiness. One prisoner mimicked the awkward crawl of a trainee, sending the others into fits of laughter. For moments, mockery dulled the ache of captivity. But not all shared the same zeal. A few younger women watched the Americans with quiet curiosity rather than scorn. They noticed details others ignored, subtle hand signals, swift adjustments, teamwork hidden beneath apparent disorder. Still, the majority drowned them out. Pride was safer than doubt. To question openly risked being seen as disloyal, even traitorous, to the ideals they'd been taught since their earliest days in uniform. The fence became both barrier and stage. On one side, women rehearsed their superiority through ridicule. On the other, Americans honed skills for battle. Two worlds collided silently, neither realizing how much the other would shape them. For Erika, the fence was a mirror. Through it, she saw not just enemy soldiers, but the crumbling of her certainty. She mocked louder than anyone, desperate to drown out the faint stirrings of unease. And as autumn deepened, the ritual of mockery reached its peak. Yet within weeks, the same fence that echoed with laughter would bear witness to silence. Silence born not of scorn, but of stunned realization. The barracks door creaked open one evening, and Erika Weber was summoned by name. A guard, polite but firm, told her Colonel Morrison wanted to speak. The room fell silent, curiosity thick among the women. As she walked across the compound, the sound of American training carried faintly on the wind. Shouts, gunfire, boots pounding dirt. Erika smirked inwardly. More chaos, she thought, preparing to mock whatever nonsense awaited. Colonel Morrison's office overlooked the main training grounds. Papers stacked neatly, maps pinned to the wall, the faint smell of tobacco smoke lingering. He rose as Erika entered, greeting her with disarming civility that unsettled her confidence. "Miss Weber," he began evenly, "we're launching a program to allow prisoners to observe our training directly." His tone was calm, measured. "Not forced participation, observation. We believe you may find it enlightening." Erika's eyebrows arched sharply. Observe American training? To her, the idea was laughable. She almost laughed aloud. "You want us to watch?" she asked, her skepticism sharpening each word like a blade. Morrison leaned against his desk, folding his arms. "Yes, we don't ask for agreement, only honest observation. You'll have notebooks, the freedom to record, draw conclusions not from propaganda, but from what you see yourself." Erika bit back a smirk. To her, this was opportunity disguised as absurdity. She could document every flaw, every mistake, proving once and for all the inferiority of America's so-called military machine. "I'll observe," she replied coolly, though certainty blazed in her chest. "But I expect my conclusions will confirm what I already know." Morrison simply smiled faintly, as if he'd heard those words many times before. News of the program spread through the barracks like wildfire. The women erupted in disbelief, mocking the Americans for their arrogance. "Imagine, inviting us to witness their weakness. They're too blind to know we'll expose them." Monica Braun declared proudly that she'd fill her notebook with ridicule, line by line. "Let them perform," she sneered. "We'll document their clumsy drills and one day share proof of their incompetence." Yet beneath the chorus of derision, curiosity simmered. Even the most arrogant prisoner couldn't deny the strange boldness of the gesture. Why would victors invite prisoners to scrutinize their methods unless they were confident? On the morning of the first scheduled observation, Erika and 5 others were escorted to a vantage point overlooking the training grounds. The dawn sky was pale, and dew clung to the grass. Sergeant Anderson, speaking careful German, explained the day's exercises. "These men will deploy soon. Watch closely. You may ask questions if you don't understand." His voice carried quiet authority, not boastfulness, another detail Erika noted with irritation. The women sat with notebooks balanced on their knees, pens poised like weapons. For them, this was no impartial study. It was a mission to confirm superiority, a chance to reinforce the walls of belief. At first glance, their confidence held firm. The Americans assembled without rigid posture, hands resting casually on rifles, no stiff alignment. Erika scribbled quickly, already drafting lines about disorder and lack of discipline. But as drills commenced, something unfamiliar caught her attention. Soldiers moved not in lockstep, but with fluid coordination, adapting instinctively to terrain. Independent motions overlapped seamlessly into a larger pattern, messy to the eye, yet strangely effective. The laughter among the women faltered, replaced by uneasy silence. What looked like chaos carried purpose. What seemed sloppy revealed intent. For the first time, Erika hesitated before writing her notes. Something didn't fit her script. Colonel Morrison's voice echoed in her mind. "Observe with an open mind." She clenched her pen tighter, resisting the seed of doubt. Yet that morning marked the beginning of a lesson she couldn't laugh away. The morning air at Fort Leavenworth was crisp, laced with the faint tang of gunpowder. Erika sat stiffly on the wooden bench, notebook ready, determined to record every flaw she expected to see. American soldiers assembled before them, not snapping into rigid attention but standing casually, rifles resting comfortably. To Erika's indoctrinated eyes, this was laziness masquerading as readiness. She smirked, pen already scratching sharp judgments. Yet when the whistle blew, the unit sprang forward, not in unison, but in purposeful motion. Soldiers broke into smaller groups, shifting through uneven terrain with surprising agility. The loose formation looked disorganized, yet it advanced effectively. Confusion prickled at Erika's certainty. In the Wehrmacht, soldiers marched like gears in a machine, perfect synchronization the ultimate goal. Here, men seemed to operate independently, adjusting instinctively, while still maintaining an invisible cohesion. "Why aren't they moving together?" Monica whispered, frustration edging her voice. Erika shared the sentiment. To them, scattered movement meant vulnerability, a breakdown of discipline. Yet the Americans moved swiftly, covering ground with surprising speed. Captain Williams, overseeing the drill, stepped closer to the observation post. His explanation came without condescension. "Rigid formations look impressive, but they're dangerous in real combat. Terrain isn't uniform. Our men adapt. It keeps them alive." The words stung more than Erika expected. Adaptation wasn't celebrated in German training. Obedience was. Her pen hovered above the paper, unsure whether to write the insult she wanted or the uncomfortable truth forming in her mind. The squad encountered an obstacle, an enemy position simulated by instructors. Instead of waiting for shouted commands, the soldiers adjusted instantly. One man flanked left, another provided cover, while the rest advanced decisively. The maneuver was seamless. Erika frowned. In the Wehrmacht, such a scenario demanded reporting upward, awaiting revised orders. That process could take minutes. These Americans resolved it in seconds, acting as if every man had rehearsed independent decision-making. "Discipline requires control," Erika muttered bitterly. "Without orders, there's chaos." Captain Williams overheard, smiling faintly. "Or," he countered, "without orders, there's initiative. Our soldiers are trusted to think. War doesn't pause while you wait for instructions." The remark struck like a hidden blade. Erika's memories of capture surfaced, her unit obeying outdated orders, holding ground long after it became untenable. Perfect obedience had not saved them, it had led them into enemy hands. More drills followed. Soldiers scaled walls, crawled under barbed wire, coordinated fire teams, all with a rhythm that seemed improvised but somehow worked. Their movements lacked parade perfection, yet radiated a confidence born of trust and practice. Monica muttered in disbelief. "This would never work in Germany." Yet her voice lacked conviction. She too noticed how quickly problems were solved, how obstacles dissolved under the soldiers' autonomy, how effectiveness eclipsed appearances. Erika scribbled furiously, her notes no longer mocking but conflicted. Every line carried tension, between indoctrination and observation, between what she believed should work and what she saw actually working before her eyes. The women exchanged uneasy glances. The laughter that once rolled freely at the fence now felt hollow. It was harder to sneer when evidence of efficiency played out so undeniably before them. When the session ended, Sergeant Anderson dismissed the soldiers with relaxed authority. No rigid salutes, no barked commands, yet the respect was obvious, earned rather than demanded. Another difference the Germans could not easily dismiss. As they returned to the compound, Erika walked in silence, her mind unraveling. She had mocked chaos. Now she had seen strategy hidden within it. And for the first time, doubt gnawed at certainty. Behind the wire, the women whispered late into the night, their voices stripped of arrogance. Something in their world view had shifted. What they had witnessed refused to be forgotten. It lingered like an unwelcome shadow. This time, the Americans staged a larger exercise. No officers barked from the front. Instead, sergeants, seasoned non-commissioned leaders, coordinated squads. Their authority was subtle, based on trust, guidance, and encouragement, rather than rigid, unquestioned control. To the German prisoners, the sight was baffling. In their world, sergeants executed orders, nothing more. Command flowed downward like iron, unbreakable. Here, enlisted men were shaping decisions, as though responsibility had been entrusted to them directly. Erika's pen scratched across the page, disbelief coding her notes. Enlisted making tactical choices, she wrote. Impossible. Reckless. Yet her eyes betrayed fascination, drawn to the ease with which decisions rippled across the formation. The soldiers encountered a simulated ambush. Without hesitation, one sergeant directed suppressing fire while another squad maneuvered around the flank. The entire plan unfolded in seconds, fluid and effective, without waiting for an officer's command. Monica shook her head, muttering, "Where are the officers? Who is really in charge?" Captain Williams, standing nearby, answered evenly, "Sergeants lead here. Officers guide strategy, but tactical control rests in the hands of those closest to the fight." The explanation clashed violently with their training. In Germany, hierarchy was sacred. Orders descended, never questioned. Soldiers were pieces on a chessboard, moved by unseen hands. Initiative was a dangerous word, one step from insubordination. But here, initiative was celebrated. Erika watched as a private spotted a gap in cover and shouted for his team to shift. The sergeant nodded approval rather than chastising him. Within seconds, the adjustment saved time. This small act unsettled Erika more than any maneuver so far. The private had thought, spoken, and acted. He hadn't been punished. He had been trusted. That trust was foreign, almost incomprehensible to her. The Americans believed chaos was inevitable in war. Radios failed, officers were lost, plans unraveled. Their answer wasn't blind obedience, but empowering every soldier to adapt. To Erika, the philosophy seemed reckless, yet undeniably effective in practice. During a break, she challenged Williams directly. "How can you allow this? In our army, such independence would fracture cohesion." Williams met her gaze. "Your cohesion collapsed with your surrender. Ours thrives because every man understands the mission." His words sliced through her defenses. Erika remembered the day of her capture, her unit following rigid orders even as the battlefield shifted beneath them. Cohesion had not saved them. It had trapped them. The drills resumed. Each soldier seemed to carry fragments of command, woven together like threads in a net. No single break could unravel the whole. This resilience startled Erika, challenging everything she had once admired. Even Monica's confidence wavered. She admitted quietly, "It looks chaotic, yes, but it works." Her admission sent ripples through the group. Pride demanded denial, yet their eyes betrayed reluctant acknowledgement of what was unfolding. Erika filled page after page, her notes less mocking now and more analytical. She still clung to her convictions. But a seed had sprouted, an awareness that initiative wasn't weakness. It might terrifyingly be strength. By the time the exercise concluded, the prisoners were subdued. Gone were the sharp laughs and cutting remarks. They had watched authority bend without breaking, discipline exist without rigidity, and independence flourish without destroying order. As the women were led back toward the compound, Erika gripped her notebook tightly. Inside were words she never imagined she'd write. Perhaps the true strength of an army lies not in obedience but in initiative. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of that private's bold decision haunted her. Could it be that real power came not from silence, but from the courage to act? The more Erika observed, the clearer it became that American training wasn't just about drills or tactics. It reflected something deeper, an entire cultural mindset that shaped how soldiers thought, moved, and fought. One afternoon, as squads rehearsed tactical problem-solving, Erika noticed how questions were encouraged. Soldiers asked why and how, and their sergeants didn't silence them. Instead, they explained, debated, even adjusted methods when better ideas emerged. In her German world, such behavior would have been insubordination. Orders were law, not conversation. Yet here, dialogue seemed woven into discipline. The Americans weren't just memorizing commands, they were learning to think like leaders. Captain Williams explained it plainly. Our army mirrors our nation. We're a democracy. Citizens question authority, propose ideas, and act independently. We'd be hypocrites to build a military that demanded blind obedience. Erika found the logic difficult to dismiss. German soldiers had been molded into cogs, efficient but replaceable. American soldiers were being shaped into problem solvers, adaptable in chaos. It was discipline of a different kind, less rigid, more resilient. During one drill, a simulated communication failure left a squad without officer instructions. To Erika's shock, the men regrouped, devised a plan themselves, and executed it successfully. No panic, no waiting, just initiative born from training. Watching them, she remembered her capture. Her unit had followed orders to hold ground, even as conditions collapsed. Radios failed, reinforcements never arrived, yet no one acted independently. Obedience had sealed their defeat more than bullets. At night, in whispered barracks discussions, the prisoners wrestled with the contradiction. Monica admitted reluctantly, "It's their culture. Americans grow up deciding for themselves. We were raised to obey. Perhaps their soldiers reflect that difference." Not everyone agreed. Some clung to propaganda, insisting German order was still superior. But the cracks were widening. Evidence was harder to deny when it unfolded daily before their eyes with undeniable effectiveness. Colonel Morrison reminded Erika during a quiet conversation. Methods aren't born in isolation. They're children of culture. Our training works because it fits our values. Yours failed because it reflected authoritarian rigidity, not battlefield necessity. The words echoed painfully. She realized the debate wasn't simply military, it was ideological. The German system valued hierarchy, conformity, obedience. The American system prized initiative, questioning, adaptability. Each mirrored the society that had birthed it. As weeks passed, Erika's notes became less derisive, more analytical. She documented differences meticulously: centralized versus decentralized command, obedience versus autonomy, rigidity versus flexibility. For the first time, her conclusions felt less like propaganda and more like truth. What unsettled her most was not that Americans were winning battles with different methods, but that those methods were tied to values she had once dismissed as weakness. Democracy, she realized, had a hidden strength in war. She wrote privately in her journal, "We mocked them for seeming casual, but perhaps it is confidence. They do not need rigidity to prove discipline. They carry it within their freedom to act. This admission weighed heavily on her pride. To acknowledge it fully meant conceding that German superiority had been a myth. It wasn't resources alone that doomed the Reich. It was philosophy itself, chained to outdated ideals. Monica noticed Erika's growing silence. "You're changing," she whispered one evening. Erika didn't deny it. "Perhaps," she replied softly. "I'm only seeing more clearly now. Culture shapes combat, and maybe ours was never suited for this war." The realization was bitter, but undeniable. The war wasn't simply lost on battlefields. It was lost in the classrooms, the training grounds, the philosophies that shaped how soldiers were taught to think, or not to think. As autumn winds swept across Kansas, Erika closed her notebook one evening with trembling fingers. For the first time, she admitted inwardly, America's soldiers weren't clumsy farmers. They were professionals forged by a culture that valued initiative. The chill of November seeped through the compound, but for Erika, the cold came from within. Every new drill she observed chipped away at her certainty, leaving her pride brittle and dangerously thin. She replayed images of captured comrades marching into camps, defeated not because they lacked courage, but because they lacked freedom to act. Perfect obedience had guided them into traps their commanders never anticipated. Watching American squads adapt with lightning speed during exercises was a cruel reminder. The very qualities she mocked, casual posture, relaxed formations, independence, were the same qualities that had given them survival on battlefields. One day, after a simulated assault exercise, Williams approached her. "Notice how they solved problems without me?" he asked gently. Erika bristled, unwilling to answer. But her silence was answer enough, and he knew it. That night, she wrote with a heavy hand. German soldiers fought with discipline but without choice. Americans fight with choice, yet maintain discipline. Which proved stronger? The answer is a wound I cannot ignore. Monica, reading over her shoulder, sighed. "So, we were wrong?" The words hung like a confession in the dim light. Erika shut the notebook quickly, unwilling to say it aloud, yet knowing the truth already burned inside. The laughter at the fence was gone. Now the women watched in silence, each wrestling with pride against evidence. Their mockery had been replaced by quiet unease, and the change unsettled the guards who noticed. Erika remembered Colonel Morrison's challenge, judge not on assumptions, but on evidence. She realized with growing dread that evidence was everywhere. America's sloppy methods had shattered Germany's rigid perfection. Facts were becoming impossible to twist. Her capture itself was proof. Her unit had executed obsolete orders flawlessly, holding positions long after collapse was inevitable. If initiative had been permitted, lives might have been saved. Instead, blind obedience led them to ruin. The truth gnawed at her like hunger. It wasn't that Germans were cowards or Americans inherently superior. It was that their training, their culture, their values had prepared them for two very different wars. Williams pressed the point during another discussion. Your army prized obedience. Ours prizes effectiveness. Look where each philosophy led. Erika wanted to argue, but her voice betrayed her. She had no defense left. Some prisoners still resisted, clinging to comforting myths. We lost to numbers, not skill, one insisted. But even they avoided Erika's gaze. Knowing her silence meant she no longer believed those hollow explanations. The realization was more painful than capture. It wasn't merely that Germany had lost. It was why. They had trained soldiers to be statues, flawless in form, but helpless when the ground shifted beneath their boots. Admitting this felt like betrayal. But denying it felt worse. Erika began to see her mockery of Americans not as arrogance, but as blindness. She had mistaken appearance for substance, obedience for strength. Her pen carved new words in her notebook. Our men were not superior. They were obedient. Obedience without thought is weakness. Initiative, though chaotic in form, proved stronger when tested by reality. She wept silently after writing it, ashamed of her own tears. Not for her capture, nor even for defeat, but for the years wasted believing in a myth that had cost so many lives. The painful realization spread like contagion through the compound. Pride cracked, doubts multiplied, and though some resisted, most knew the truth had become unavoidable. German discipline was precise, but American adaptability had been decisive. Erika finally understood the heaviest irony. What she once ridiculed as weakness was exactly what had made the Americans strong. And that truth, though painful, could no longer be denied. Colonel Morrison summoned Erika again, this time not with a guard's brisk order, but with something that felt almost like an invitation. She entered his office with mixed emotions: suspicion, curiosity, and a reluctant respect. On his desk lay a stack of her notes, not the mocking ones from early days, but the later pages, analytical, probing, filled with observations that betrayed the crumbling of her old convictions. "You've been honest in your writing," Morrison began, his tone neither triumphant nor smug. "That honesty matters. We'd like you to compile a formal report, your perspective, your comparison of German and American training.